Thank you, Chairman, sir. First of all, I would like to thank Professor Adil Kumar, sir, for giving me this opportunity to be part of this national seminar. The topic of our presentation today is Indian foreign policy towards South Asia, challenges and prospects. And I do understand the time constraint that we have, so I try to be as brief as possible.
Switch on the mic, please. Yeah.
Considering the time limits, I'll try to be as brief as possible. My presentation is rather more slightly theoretical and is more security-centric kind of presentation that I'm trying to make here. The core argument of my presentation today is amongst various factors, India's image is perhaps one of the most important catalysts in defining India's foreign policy choices towards South Asia. And when we talk about image, India's image in South Asia, there are at least three approaches that we can look at in contemporary literature. And the three approaches that I'm going to talk about are, one is regional hegemon. India has been pursued as a regional hegemon, a regional leader, a potential emerging global power. While talking about, and each of these approaches has their own points of justification. Say for example, when India is projected as a regional hegemon, that time, most of the time, the emphasis is on the tangible strengths of India, the military and economic aspect of India's strength in South Asia. When India is projected as a leader, that time the emphasis is more on rather soft power aspect of India, the culture, the political values that India has been talking about. And when it comes to project India as an emerging global power, that time here the emphasis is on, it's a combination kind of thing, that you start talking about hard power, you start talking about soft power, but at the same time there's one more important element that needs to be added here while projecting India as a global emerging power, and that element is India's influence, potential influence in multilateral institutions, global multilateral institutions. These are the three things that needs to be looked at from a security point of view, and that's what my presentation is all about. If you look at all of these approaches and the phases of India's foreign policy towards South Asia, right from 1947 when India got independence, at that time Nehru's foreign policy rather inclined more towards a kind of soft power approach, and it projected India's culture, its non-alignment. And then, as we move ahead after the Nehruvian era, when we have Indira Gandhi and the so-called Indira Doctrine, 1971 war, and as Professor Chintamani Mahapatra said, we celebrated two Diwalis. So all these things were trying to change India's image in South Asia. Third phase, more specifically post-liberalization, and more specifically after 2008 onwards, we can see a drastic change has occurred in India's foreign policy, more specifically towards South Asia. And India is again trying to go back to its soft power kind of approach while dealing with its neighbor in South Asia. At the same time, when we talk about India's approach in the context of India's image, there are certain constraints. Why India's image is contested in South Asia. First thing I would like to talk about is geopolitical fault lines that exist in South Asia, the asymmetric power relations in South Asia, and the role of extra-regional actors. Because despite the fact that my presentation is more South Asia-centric, inevitably it has to deal with extra-regional actors as well, because they play a very important role in the balance of power, in regional balance of power. Now there are at least 5 key geopolitical features that have been playing a major role in defining India's image in South Asia. First one is the Indo-centric geography of South Asia. India occupies almost 72% territory of South Asia. India accounts for almost 80% GDP of South Asia. besides that, India has the largest military power in South Asia. So in all these terms, we can see that it's really a kind of Indo-centric geography that South Asia has. Second important thing is, although Indo-centric, South Asia is not a unipolar region, because Indo-centric geography makes India appear as a de facto hegemon of the region, but still it's not the unipolar region. We have, and perhaps one of the most important reasons behind that is the presence of nuclear element. So you have Pakistan, and that is there to counterbalance India's influence or the dominance in the region. That's the reason why it's not a unipolar region. Third feature is the physical geographical boundaries of Indian subcontinent are not consistent with the political boundaries of the states. And this feature is more important because there are two reasons why political boundaries are crucial. Political boundaries are crucial because these boundaries define the territorial extent of sovereign state. And second important thing, these boundaries also differentiate between identities, more on the lines of a nation state if you try to look at the states. Now what is happening in South Asia, what has happened in South Asia, that these political boundaries have failed to do both. Neither could they exactly define the territorial extent of sovereign states in South Asia, nor could they differentiate identities in South Asia on the line of nation states. And that have been creating problems between states in South Asia. Fourth important feature, geopolitical feature of the region is that almost every South Asian state share border with India, and none of them, except Pakistan and Afghanistan, share border with each other. The moment we talked about the porous boundaries that we just talked, and the next moment we talk about the way these states share boundaries with each other. So there's going to be that situation is bound to create some sort of problems between states, and why I'll show you another slide that explains it. And the fifth important geopolitical feature in this region is that there is an involvement of extra-regional actors, and more specifically because of the strategic location of South Asian states in the region. So all these features have been playing a major role in defining India's role in South Asia, or rather defining India's image in South Asia. And if we look at it, that how things have started changing, more specifically after 2008 onwards, post-liberalization, when India started emerging as a potential global leader. This is what is the South Asian region. If this is the physical map of South Asia, and if you look at carefully, you will also see the political boundaries and how there is a mismatch between the political and physical boundaries. Why that inconsistency is important to understand is because when we talk about political boundaries and when we discuss the issue of sharing natural resources, that has become more problematic. You can draw political boundaries, you can divide territories, that is comparatively, relatively easy, but when it comes to share natural resources, it becomes very difficult. It becomes very difficult to divide rivers between two states, and that's something which has been a major concern in South Asia. In that context, what are the major challenges that India is facing today? At least three challenges that we can discuss. One is the changing India's image and the perception of smaller states in South Asia. The way they have been looked at India as a hegemon, a regional hegemon. Indo-Pak relations, second major challenge in the region. And third one is increasing Chinese influence in South Asia and larger Indo-Pacific. All these things are linked together. More specifically, I'll briefly talk about China's increasing influence in South Asia, because the way China has started increasing its influence in South Asia, it has compelled India to rethink its policy towards South Asia, and more specifically smaller states in South Asia. China has its own justification. Whatever policies that China had taken towards the Indian Ocean or South Asia, There are at least three major concerns, three Chinese concerns, domestic concerns, regional priorities. First one is that China is concerned about its domestic stability, more specifically in western provinces like Xinjiang, which is the oil-rich region, stability, terrorism, which China had to address. And for that purpose, China has proposed this new economic bill that would, and besides that, why China has started strengthening its infrastructure facilities in J&K and Chinese occupied region and Pakistan occupied region in the northern part of India. Besides that, China has certain regional priorities. China has certain regional issues to address. Issues over South China Sea or Senkaku Island issues, the disputes between China and Japan. Besides that, one of the important priorities of China that China has to address is the developmental priorities, the increasing economic growth of China and increasing dependence on oil. Almost 90% of Chinese oil passes through Strait of Malacca. So all these factors, if you look at it, justify why China has started increasing its influence in Indian Ocean or even in South Asia. Now, how that is being pursued and what measures China has taken to address these priorities. One of the interesting aspects of Chinese policy is that they have started giving more importance to economic cooperation. They have started, it's like not a kind of a Marshall Plan, but more or less similar to that. What China is trying to do is to engage states in these regions, Southeast Asia, Indian Ocean region, even in South Asia. Till '99, this is a very clear example where we can see that India was the second largest. Sri Lanka was India was the second largest trading partner of Sri Lanka, and today, and first was the European Union was the largest trading partner of Sri Lanka in South Asia. Now, China has replaced and China has emerged as the largest trading partners of many South Asian countries, including India. Besides that, what China has done, if you look at the increased China-ASEAN trade that has exceeded $400 billion, as compared to India-ASEAN trade, $80 billion. China has also proposed, Asian Infrastructural Investment Bank has allocated $3 billion or almost $484 million to the China-ASEAN Maritime Cooperation Fund. All these measures that China has taken are, in a way, can be justified to protect its core interest in the region. How India is responding to that, and the new Maritime Silk Road and the northern economic belt that China has proposed, is all in the context of the priorities, the Chinese priority that China needs to address, but how it is being pursued by India. And when we look at it at the larger context, three things are important. Shifting center of power, the way power has started shifting from west to east, changing regional security dynamics, including the increasing role of China, and re-emergence of Cold War-like alliances in new form. In this context, what India needs to do, at least three things that most of the policies the present government has opted for. First thing is that India needs to have a region-centric approach. We have been talking about look east. Now the time has come when India also needs to think about look-around kind of policy, where India's emphasis has to be more on the neighbors. India needs to increase its trade with Southeast Asia plus Indian Ocean, IOR, Indian Ocean region. Besides that, how India should be dealing with China. There has been skepticism, more specifically after 1962, but there's one important thing that we need to understand. When we look at China as a threat, we also need to understand the limitations of India. And limitations in the sense, I think I need to skip many slides. At least three limitations. First thing is that India's inability to meet all the developmental needs of small states, more specifically in South Asia. Indo-Pak and Indo-China rivalry, and the perceived threat of India to the security of small states in South Asia. These are the major limitations. Because of these limitations, India will not afford to, in a way, collide with China in South Asia or elsewhere. So considering all these factors, the security linkages, what India needs to do is to opt for a region-centric approach. And when I say region-centric approach, there are three things that India needs to focus on. First is while dealing with smaller states, more specifically these Nepal, Bhutan and Bangladesh, which if you look at the map can see that are almost surrounded by India. India needs to evolve some sort of idea of natural partners with smaller states in South Asia. India can also strengthen SAARC because as of now, if you look at the SAARC, the percentage, if we compare the intra-regional trade in SAARC is hardly 5%, and which is much less as compared to many other regional organizations. So India needs to emphasize, or India needs to strengthen regional cooperation, more specifically SAARC. And there are few things, at least there are certain barriers, trade barriers that India needs to work on, where India can play a major role. There are barriers over trade route or transit trade problems. For example, I'll briefly talk about it. When we talk about transit trade problem, when goods from Afghanistan may come to India via Pakistan through land route, Indian goods are not allowed into Afghanistan via Pakistan. Similarly, Pakistani goods are not allowed to go to Bangladesh or Nepal via India. Only Nepal and Bhutan have got transit facilities from India for their trade with Bangladesh. These are the few things that India can seriously think about and can play a sort of proactive role to work out this thing and try to strengthen SAARC, because SAARC is an instrument which can be very important in shaping India's image as a leader instead of as a regional hegemon. Third important measure that India can opt for is soft power. Soft power has been one of the key concepts in today's international studies. But at the same time, when we talk about soft power, there are certain limitations of soft power. And while opting for soft power measures in South Asia, India needs to look at these key constraints or limitations. As Tharoor has said, that soft power becomes credible when there is a hard power behind it. And we have Niall Ferguson, who also says that soft power is merely the velvet glove concealing an iron hand. So while opting for soft power measures in South Asia, India needs to make sure that it doesn't project itself or it doesn't affect India's image adversely. Rather, India should emphasize more on its culture, political values like democracy. Democracy is one of the major strengths that India has, and rather one of the most important elements in India's soft power as compared to China. So India can emphasize more on democracy and foreign policy, which has to be more a sort of non-reciprocal when it comes to smaller states in South Asia. So these are the things that I just wanted to highlight.